how's it going? Susan Ruth here. Thanks for listening to another episode of Hey Human Podcast. This is episode 469, and my guest is Caleb Gilbert. Caleb is the president of White Glove Protection Group. He's spent over 2 decades in executive protection, and his expertise spans 51 countries and nearly every region of the United States. He's protected A-list celebrities, ultra-high net worth individuals, and Fortune 200 corporate protection teams. I'm fascinated by this kind of work. Such an interesting topic and conversation. Before I get into in other news, I want to mention that I am going to be a part of a show, a docuseries tentatively called right now at least, Haunted Holler. If you are in the Appalachian region, specifically probably eastern Kentucky area and a little bit beyond, at least for the first go around, they are looking for stories about folklore, hauntings, UFO, spooky things, noises in the woods, cryptids, whatever is in that realm that is attached to the Appalachian area. And so there is a website, Haunted Holler, HAUNTED, HOLLER.com, to go and you can submit your story. Again, they're specifically looking for people of the Appalachian region. And really, Eastern Kentucky to start with is great, or near that. And yeah, if you've got a cool story or a family lore or legend, or maybe your neighborhood or town part of your holler has got a cool, interesting, fun, spooky, weird, creepy story, definitely go and submit it to hauntedholler.com. In other news, check out heyhumanpodcast.com for links and to learn more about my guests in the show. Check out susanruth.com to learn more about me and my other artistic endeavors. And follow Susan Ruthism on social media. You can find my music on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, wherever you get your music. Rate, review, and subscribe to Hey Human Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening. Be well, be kind, be love. Here we go. Caleb Gilbert, welcome to Hey Human.
Thank you so much.
Good to see you.
You as well.
Where are you hailing from?
From Spokane, Washington area. I grew up in Spokane, Washington. Very simple life. My dad, worked a lot of jobs growing up, everything from selling insurance. We lived in a house that we paid $150 a month for rent in until I moved out. Very, very simple childhood, but it was a good time for sure. Tight
family?
Very tight-knit, very traditional, close-knit family. Up until when I was 13, we were home educated. When I was 13, I decided academia was not for me. So I started mowing lawns. I had started mowing when I was 11 with just the little old widow ladies in the neighborhood. And that became like my way to both give back to the community and then generate some income, because I wanted to buy Nike socks, and we couldn't afford that on my dad's $5 an hour he made. And so we started mowing lawns, my brother and I originally, and then just started mowing lawns and investing in business and developed it into a whole business. And at 13, I quit school full time and started working full time.
Are you eldest child?
No, I'm number 2.
Out of
4. 18 months between me and my older brother, and then just under 3 years between my younger sister, and then my youngest sister is 13 years younger. So she was late to the party, but made up for that lost time quickly.
What happens? You're a teenager, you're doing your own thing, you're making a profitable business and getting on with your life. What happens next? Do you feel a pull toward anything particular, or is your head just down, make money and do stuff?
Yeah, it really started with me, wanting to buy those Nike socks that my friends had, and not wanting to be limited by finances. And so that was kind of the start to my entrepreneurial endeavors. And I hired my first employee when I was 14, because at 14, I couldn't drive a truck around with all the lawn clippings, from doing the landscaping. So I bought truck, trailer, all the equipment, reinvested in the company, developed it out from there, got a couple commercial contracts. So we had, Department of Health and Social Services, just started, building that out until we had, 2 trucks and 2 crews and incrementally growing it. At the time, I was aspiring to become a Navy SEAL, and I wanted to, be part of the teams and be able to serve in that. My grandfather was prisoner of war in World War II, and so I grew up listening to his stories of his time in both Air Force and Army, and really was drawn to becoming a SEAL. And part of that went to a search and rescue school that was in the Upper Peninsula, Michigan, and then we did training in Miami, Florida. And just by chance, we were doing physical fitness training in Miami in this park. And we ran into these three guys that were working in corporate security. They were doing executive protection. And, we were doing underwater search and recovery diving and, all of this fun stuff. But they started talking about, hey, travel the world, you have weapons, you get paid, all of these things. And I was like, that sounds fascinating, so that planted a seed. Then I started looking into what educational opportunities are there, because obviously you can't just walk off the street and say, hey, I want to be a bodyguard. And so I started pursuing that. And then every time I went in and talked to the recruiters handed me these blocks and said, we'll teach you, these, perseverance and discipline. And I was like, I don't need you to teach me that. Like, I'm already disciplined. Like, I just want to be able to know if I'm going to be able to be a SEAL or not. And they're like, well, we can't tell if you're going to be a SEAL or a cook. Once you're in and you're stuck. And so I was like, wow, that's pretty daunting to look at, 6 years of my life being tied up with no guarantees that I'll at least have a chance for it. I really became quasi-obsessed with the whole executive protection concept. Ended up selling the lawn business to be able to pay for executive protection school, which was Executive Security International in Aspen, Colorado. Sold everything, drove out there, went through 30 days of executive protection training, which is basically just, what's expected of a bodyguard. How do you deal with, paparazzi and world travel and all these things. Left there with $43 to my name and drove towards California, not knowing what I was going to do, where I was going to end up, just living on hopes and dreams and the limited cash that I could square together, and moved to California. Started working any gig that I could. I didn't turn anything down. Started working. I think my first gig was actually $12 an hour.
Security?
Working security. Yeah, this was for a uniformed company, just security in a parking lot. It was in Hollywood, and so I was like, I'm in California. I'm gonna protect celebrities. And so I took, and as I made money, then I just reinvested in training, worked my way up through different training opportunities.
How old were you at this point?
At this point, the first time I went to California, I was 18, and then I floated back and forth for different positions. The next 9 years of my life was focused on celebrities. I'd been picked up for different details. What I like to say is I started when I first moved to Hollywood. I was guarding the dumpsters that the celebrities threw their trash in, and as my professionalism progressed, I was able to guard the people that were throwing the trash into the dumpsters. Because you look at like a awards ceremony, paparazzi and everybody will want to grab anything they can as it goes out the back, and literally like that's how I started. Until I started working all the Academy Awards and Golden Globes and started working the sites, and then started traveling with the people that went to the sites.
I go to a lot of the especially anniversary film showings because they're so fascinating. They generally have the director or some of the cast or whatnot. And without fail, there's always the security people in the wings. You can see they're generally rather large individuals and they're hyper focused. But every single time, I don't think I've been to an event. I remember I went to a Nick Cage thing, and there was a lot of them. I guess you be like 18. I'm at 18. You're full of, life, and I'm going to take the world by the balls. And I'm going to do all this stuff. And you're just a baby. You're so young. Like looking back, I think about my 18-year-old brain. Did you grow up? I grew up in a gun family. My father taught as a hobby, not his job, but as a hobby. He taught hunter safety, and he was, he'd go to the little groups and teach young people and adults how to properly deal with their firearms, and he made sure that the kids knew what they were doing and that we were always safe. And so I grew up in that family, and I'm assuming in Spokane that was a big part of the culture there as well. Is that the case?
Actually, rather interesting, because my family's always been pro guns, but my parents didn't have weapons until I bought them for them and paid for their training. My parents let me go to like hunter safety, when I was young, learning the safety side of things and all that. It's kind of funny to look back that we did hunter safety in a public school, crazy. But thinking in today's era, all the weapons and everything like that. But that foundation for hunter safety instilled in me a desire to focus on the safety side of weapons. Like with the whole gun conversation with all my clients that I've worked over the years, it's interesting to find how so many people are afraid of weapons, primarily because it's something that they're unfamiliar with. They see it on TV, they see it in the movies, but as far as them actually being close to a weapon or being aware of capabilities, limitations, mechanisms, nomenclature, things like that, it's been interesting to see how peace of mind has been brought out through people being educated in weapons. And I think with my parents, that was a big thing. Them, being more familiar with the weapons, and then as I progressed and, went through different schools and developed my array of work tools, they've had fun with me over the years, learning to shoot and shooting. And my dad has always been a huge James Bond fan. And so one of my Christmas presents was getting him a handgun that was Cerakoted in the James Bond like gold theme with 007 and everything like that. So lots of fun like that. But yes, I've definitely enjoyed both the safety aspects and then learning to be proficient with weapons.
Yeah, when people are curious and they ask me about shooting a gun and what it means. I mean, when I got my first gun, I was in college. And I sat with it. You have to really sit with it. You have to, it means, right? If you have a weapon like that, it means you have to have the understanding that this is a thing that can kill someone.
Yeah.
And you have to take that into your body and feel if that's right for you. And it used to frustrate me to see certain people be very cavalier about that kind
Absolutely.
of thing. And then I say, well, here's the thing. When you get into your car, you went to driver's safety. You learned how to drive a car. A car is a weapon. And so if you take that brain and you put it into this other brain, you'll see that the similarities are there. The knowledge is power. Knowledge is power.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm a huge advocate for, handgun training specifically. I think that whether people like guns or don't like guns, having that basic familiarity of, the safety rules, the impact, the potential, what's dangerous, what's not dangerous. I love seeing people empowered with that knowledge of knowing, this is a tool, and up until, recently when SIGs started going off by themselves, typically, guns don't shoot themselves, and that has been peace of mind for many years, is that, with the proper safety precautions in place, you can safely operate just like with any tool. If somebody goes up and grabs a jackhammer and does it wrong, it's going to hurt them, and so I'm a big proponent for weapon safety for sure.
Yeah. For somebody who does security detail, and I'm sure it's different for everyone, but I remember when I was in college and I worked at a gym, and there was a guy that also worked at the gym who also happened to be a protective person. And he took care of Harrison Ford whenever he came to town, I guess, or I don't know that he traveled with him, but I remember this guy knew Taekwondo. He knew karate. He knew how to fire a gun, obviously. He was proficient in a couple languages, and he was young. Man, this guy is a badass,
Right?
How much of that, because now you have your own company, and we can get to how that happened, but how much of that is something that you instill? Because I feel like in order to, run with the wolves, you have to know how wolves think. And yet also you need to be able to protect your person, but also integrate into their life seamlessly. And so if they speak other languages, if they know about finance, if they know about, the world at large, geography, blah, blah, that your protection should also know these things. Otherwise, you do kind of stick out like a sore thumb. I feel like, and maybe I'm taking this out from the movies, but I feel like you'd have to sort of blend into someone's life so they're not annoyed by you. You can protect them. Look, everything I know I learned from The Bodyguard, Kevin Costner.
That's right. Thank you, Kevin. It's amazing because the number of skills that you need to be in executive protection is mind-blowing and overwhelming, quite honestly, if you think about it. I've spent $487,000 in security-specific training in the last 25 years, and that's encompassed everything from weapons training to Krav Maga to Taekwondo, practiced Taekwondo for several years, driver's training, language training, of which I am not good. Thankfully, AirPod 3 has automatic language translation with them, so that's going to make life easier for those of us who are language compromised. But the lifestyle of executive protection is truly about learning and adapting to our protectees environment. When I work celebrities, I would work to blend into their environment, figure out how I can take and be beneficial to them. And then when I transitioned over to private family offices in corporate America, I figured out, all right, who are my cross-functional partners? Who do I need to sync with in different parts of the organization so that I can take and be of benefit? Sure, I'm the guy with the gun who's going to stop anybody from doing something bad, right? Like I am that overt deterrence. I'm 265 pounds of bodyguard that is there to do what they need to do. But the other 99% of the time where I'm not doing that 1% of what is needed when something bad happens, that 99% of the time is what keeps me employed in between. And that's really what you have to focus on, the soft skills, the interpersonal skills, the ability to speak to finance individuals in a metric that they can understand, speaking about budgets and everything in corporate America. All of that I had to learn. Keep in mind, I quit school at 13. I hated math literally from the time that I first started it. And for the majority of my life has been something that I was like extremely proud of is I quit school at 13. I'm not going to cover that, like I don't need academia. And then when I was 29 years old, I had a client that I was working in the East Coast in New York and Philadelphia. He said, Caleb, I like you, but you need an education. And part of that adapting to be part of their world was me realizing that, I needed to augment my limited education, and my 13-year-old brain had gotten me until I was 29, but I needed to step it up, and so that's when I started pursuing academia. I spent 11 years after that pursuing that. I was inspired by him because he asked me, Caleb, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I said, I see myself here. Like I'm senior agent on a massive team, like with an amazing protectee traveling the world, like flying a helicopter between Philadelphia and New York City 3 times a week. Like I'm living the life, And he said, what got you here isn't going to get you to where you're going. And he said, there's more in store for you. You just need to find it. And that inspiration fundamentally transformed the trajectory of my life. In my head, I thought I want to be a bodyguard, but then he said there's more. And so I was like, well, wait, what's more than that? Like that has been my sole pursuit for a decade, right? And so I started looking at, all right, what are next steps? Like, where could I go? I'm like, my whole life I had imposter syndrome, because I quit school at 13. I didn't do anything formal. I'd never been to, public school. Like I hadn't, done so many things that other people had done. Hadn't gone to college, hadn't been in the military, hadn't been in law enforcement. 86% of the industry at the time was military law enforcement. And so I'm sitting here working all these details and everybody's like, oh yeah, Caleb's a good guy, but he's not military or law enforcement, and that imposter syndrome, even though my weapons proficiency was much more accurate and quick than them, even though my ability to safeguard the clients was much more refined than theirs, that didn't matter at that point in time because I didn't have that military or law enforcement capability and it limited me. And I said, well, I don't have that, but what do I have? And that's when I started figuring out, all right, these are my baseline skills that I have. This is my kind of inventory, my personal inventory of what I've developed, what I've been able to do. And I kind of used that to say, all right, that's what I have. What do I want to have? And I was like, you know, it'd be crazy if I became a chief security officer of a Fortune 50 company by the time I was 50. You know, I was 29 years old at this time. So I was like, all right, let's give myself 21 years to do the impossible. Right. And I went on LinkedIn and I looked at all Fortune 50 chief security officers, and I looked what skills they had, what education they had, what backgrounds they had. And I saw, you know, they're all military, law enforcement, you know, a lot of feds, you know, and all that. What do they have that I could achieve? And I saw that one thing in common was they had amazing schools on their resumes before they went into, you know, government or their, you know, chief security officer positions. So I was like, well, I'm going to start applying to the best schools in the country. And if they don't accept me, then I'll go to the second best school. If they don't accept me, I'll go to the next best school, you know? And so keep in mind, I quit school at 13. So I didn't have a high school diploma. I didn't have a GED. I didn't have, you know, anything, you know, showing that I had any, you know, formal training. And so I went to the local community college because I knew that would be the first step. And I talked to them. And they said, well, you're going to have to take these 5 courses, pre-courses. They're not going to count as credits towards your associate's degree. But if you can take those 5 courses, get satisfactory grades, then we'll admit you into the program. And I was like, that's going to waste an entire year of my life. Like, I'm already an adult learner at this point. I'm traveling all over the world. I don't have time to deal with all this. So I said, well, how many courses can I take just as a visiting scholar? Because I'd seen a portion on visiting scholars on there. And they're like, well, you can take up to 3. And I was like, huh. And I was like, do those count for credits? They're like, yeah, they count for credits. So I was like, all right. And then simultaneously, I did a prior learning assessment through their criminal justice department, which assessed the prior learning, like my executive protection school. I'd gone to EMT school and become an EMT and all that. And so while I did my first 2 classes with the community college, I simultaneously did this prior learning assessment. They identified that I had enough prior learning to count for 16 college credits. And then I did these 2 courses, criminal law and psychology 101. And I got a A- and a B+ on both of those. And so I had that on my transcripts. And so then I went off to a trip. And then when I came back, I was like, all right, do I want to take more courses or how do I want to go about this? I was like, well, it'd be cool if I could transfer to a 4-year college. So I started looking at 4-year colleges that would accept me. And then I quickly found that in order to be accepted into a 4-year college without a high school diploma, you have to have at least 12 regionally accredited credits to your name, of which I had because I had taken those 2 courses and I had the prior learning assessments. So that was my gateway into college without a high school diploma, was getting those. Applied for Stanford's International Security Graduate Program, was accepted into that by some miracle. They didn't have a full master's. So I applied for Johns Hopkins University's Global Security Studies and Intelligence Program. And 11 years later, completed those 2 things.
You achieved that while you were maintaining a full life of work and existence.
Working 80 hours a week.
Good Lord. How did you do that? I mean, just determination or a lot of coffee or what?
Yeah, a lot of coffee, a lot of pre-workouts. And, I'd be in whatever country. I remember taking one final. I was in Bali and I remember it was 3 a.m. local time that I had to take this final in order to, stay qualified for it. And so I was online trying to get a secure connection with all that. And I was sweating whether or not I was going to even be able to, complete it with good internet, because back then there wasn't Starlink or anything. And, I approached it like I've approached everything else in my life, one foot in front of the other. It's a daunting task to try and achieve major milestones. It is entirely possible if you just keep on trudging forward one step at a time, keep my head low, avoid distractions, take breaks when you have to, but look for opportunities to push through.
How does one go in the military? One is part of a unit, and your mind, you are created into a soldier that is protective of the unit and the Constitution, obviously, but that it's like this greater thing that you are sacrificing for. whether or not you lose your life, God forbid, but there is a great sacrifice to being in the military. And in my humble opinion. So when one is wrapping their head around what it means to do what you do and how you're training other people to do what you do, it's a big difference to go from this sort of this whole thing, this whole unit that's functioning as one body, to now I'm going to protect this girl who's got 2 million Instagram followers, and my life is less than. In a way, you have to be like, okay, I would take a bullet for this person. It's one thing, again, the president, the representative of an idea. It's not just the person who is the president, it's the idea, and you're protecting, in theory, the Constitution, the entirety of the United States of America, or whichever country that they are president of. So how does one do that? How does one shift their brain to say, okay, now I am the first line of defense, as you said, to anything harming anyone that is maybe not of that kind of grandeur?
Right. Well, and that's been the wild ride that has been my life, because I started out working with celebrities, and I found out actually rather quickly that I really like very little about most celebrities' lifestyles. There's a ton of inconsistencies. There's a ton of distractions. It's a very shallow world, if you will. And I have nothing against it, but for me, I wanted to develop deeper abilities to protect people based on more than them being an A-lister. As I transitioned into ultra high net worth and corporate CEOs, Fortune 200 clients, it became about more than me. When I developed teams, it became more about, just the individual. You're protecting, not only the brand, but you're protecting a segment of society. The individuals that I protected have fundamentally transformed, especially the technology space. Like the things that we're using to communicate right now have been developed, implemented, brought to market, and sustained by people that I've protected for many years. And thinking about what life would be like without those individuals who have brought us major milestones, major advancements and things like that, it's a massive hit to society if those people, weren't able to be innovative. And so I think realizing, with the military, you have something bigger than yourself that you're representing. And in executive protection, sure, there's the opportunity to say it's just about the money, but it's also, for me, became about protecting people, protecting something bigger than myself. And then as I started to develop programs for families and saw how, the family units would, move and grow and develop in different stages of life and all of those things, it was about protecting the family and letting the protective instincts that I had from a young age blossom and grow into my own methods of innovation and ways to develop new strategies and techniques that are now used globally by the protection industry, just because I was in a position to have the opportunity without previous biases to create new ways to do things and to keep people safe.
Mm-hmm. I'm just now thinking of, when you said family, I thought of the film that I freaking loved and just rewatched recently, was Man on Fire.
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you, as an employer of people that are wishing to achieve your kind of success in what you do, how do you pick a particular individual of a yes or a no? Just like in the SEALs, it's the best of the best of the best. And the weeding, I'm sure, like day one, I want to be a Navy SEAL. There's probably 1,500 people. And then day last, there's 4 people.
Right.
Major deal. So how would you assess someone? If I come to you and say, I want to be this, how do you assess me? What are some of the things you go over? Because I know there's, micro body movements. There's also, there's what someone's saying versus what they mean. And I'm sure at this point in your life, your bullshit detector is really epic. So how do you do that? Let's say I come to you and I say, I want to do this. What are you looking for in me?
Yeah. So what we've done is we've developed 5 distinct phases in our recruiting process. So this is built on obviously human resources requirements from both corporate America and other places, kind of the best of the best things from there. But we've also integrated behavioral science into it. One of the things that you mentioned, micro expressions and saying one thing and expressing another, all of those. And so the 5 phases, the first phase is kind of the screening process, and that's really the process where we identify, is this someone who is aspiring to be in the industry? Is their expectations aligned with reality? A lot of people think that they're going to, leave the military and come into executive protection and be Kevin Costner on Whitney Houston, within a couple weeks, and it's just going to be all gravy. And so like aligning people's expectations when they're applying for a position is a big part of what we do. The second phase is where we actually take individuals who have the qualifications necessary for the position being advertised. And that's where we take and we put them in front of a panel of industry professionals. So we take people from different teams and we interview each candidate. And this is really more of a cultural assessment, right? Is this person's culture going to align with the culture of the team that we're anticipating that they would work on? Every single team that we curate is curated to be able to be a direct reflection of the actual protectee's world, whether it's a corporate world, whether it's a private family office, whether it's a celebrity, whether it's a sports figure, whatever it is, there's a culture that each individual protectee has. And so we want to make sure that if we're sticking a protector on that individual, that person will be a direct reflection of their culture. And so that's really what the panel interview is meant to do, is take, multiple individuals and get a good idea of what this person's all about culturally. With each program that we have our embedded director. So this is a director position, a senior individual who's in charge for the entire team, operations on the ground. They're the ones that deal directly with the client. And then they're the third phase. And that's where they take and they decide whether or not the other steps have brought a person to the table that they could put their name, their stamp of approval on in moving them forward in getting a position. Then anybody that makes it past that goes to my senior leadership team and myself. And so that's my VP of Partner Success, Jerry Jacobs, who ran the California Governor's Detail for a very long time. And we take and we look at this individual and we look for any inconsistencies. We look for any anomalies. We look for anything that's part of that we've identified through our protective intelligence efforts in the pre hiring screening. And we look for anything that might not line up, any warning signs. And then after that, if they make it past that, we give them a conditional offer of employment. And then we put them through our background process, which is industry leading background process, very similar to what you see in the government, subject interviews and really a deep dive into who this individual is, what they've been about. Are they an individual of character? And is this somebody who we want to represent the White Glove brand? And that is our hiring process. What I love about the process is, not only has structure, but if somebody doesn't make it, they really know why, and that helps people improve and develop. You might not be with us, but it helps them improve and develop as a professional because they know, well, I claimed I went to this executive protection school and I just signed up for it, but I never actually went, or whatever it is. All those anomalies that we catch in the process, that's what allows us to make sure that the people working with us are, well suited for the position. High touch, high level of service. At White Glove, we're not a security company that is looking to just provide security to anybody. We're looking to curate teams for a select few. And so we don't accept most clients. When we first started White Glove, we had 12 target clients. We spent our first 14 months in existence not producing any revenue. We simply spent that time pursuing what we needed to have a solid foundation from a business perspective to be able to hit the ground running at day one, to be able to serve the highest level of clientele. I'd actually never wanted to start a security company. Most of the time people work as a provider or a security company. They don't always make it to a corporate position or a full-time employee position. And that's really been the pursuit of most people. And so as I worked my way up and made it to different director positions, that was the goal. And I really had no interest in starting a security company.
How many employees or agents? But I don't know what to call them. How many
agents?
Agents at White Glove Protection Group do you now oversee?
I can't say exactly how many agents just for operational security purposes, but what I can say is that we are, like today, we're operational in Rome. We're operational in like just operations, live operations taking place. Today, we have teams in Rome. We have teams in Sydney. We have teams in New York. We have teams in Houston, Austin, Dallas, San Francisco, Palo Alto, all over the world with multiple corporations, Fortune 500 clients, private family offices and entities. And that's what I can share.
Okay, that makes sense. Speaking to the family, what do you think? I mean, from you, I would say expert. What's your expert opinion about how families can protect themselves, who maybe they're not famous, maybe they're not dealing with stalkers or whatever, but how their self-protection, especially in this day and age, human trafficking is at an all-time high when moms are or dads, not whatever, either way, are out with their kids. What do you think people are missing? What do you think they need to be more vigilant? I mean, you got to live your life, obviously, and we don't want to live our life in fear. Empowerment is half the battle, but what do you think people are maybe doing right, doing wrong?
Yeah. I think that we can't live in a state of fear, because at the end of the day, that state of fear will terrorize everyone's hearts. But what I think that we should live in is a state of awareness, right? Just understanding that there are bad people out there trying to do bad things. We don't have to be scared in order to have that sense of awareness. And I like to simplify it. If I can oversimplify anything so my 13-year-old brain can understand it, then anyone can understand it. I like to take, highly academic principles and whittle them down into simple points. And so what I like to share is anybody can do self-executive protection. Right? You are the executive of your home as a mom, and you can protect yourself. You can protect those you love by following all the same principles that we follow in complex behavioral science and human pattern recognition, and all the complex things that we provide really boils down to 3 key indicators that anybody can understand. And that's when you look around an environment. Let's say you walk into Starbucks, right? You go to Starbucks every single day. And as you walk into Starbucks, you see that environment. If you're looking from an awareness perspective, you're looking for what the baseline is, right? Think of like when they're doing a polygraph test, how the scribble goes up and down, up and down, up and down, right? You're looking for whatever that middle line is that's across all the middle of that. Look for that baseline. And that is the what the people look like, what the people are talking like, what are they acting like, right? That becomes your baseline for that environment. And the baseline at Starbucks is going to be different than your baseline at your kid's baseball game, right? But whatever that baseline is, that becomes the normal for that environment. And so all you have to do to be able to understand what pre-attack indicators are going to take place is identify, is there something different happening in this environment that is outside of the baseline, right? And so as you look around the room, I like to give everybody the thumbs up, so I'm holding my thumb up, right? And I'm looking at every single person, thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. And it's a millisecond process. But if you look at every person in the room and they're all thumbs up because they're normal for that baseline, if you see somebody that's not normal for that baseline, then I call that a thumb sideways. That doesn't mean that this is an active killer. It doesn't mean it's somebody that you have to be scared of. It just means that there's something in this individual that is out of line with the baseline. Could be lots of reasons for that. But as I'm doing a scan of Starbucks, you look at every single person, thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. If you see somebody that's thumb sideways, take a mental note and then continue scanning, looking for any more thumb sideways. And then if there's something drastically wrong, then that's a thumbs down. And then what that does is that allows you scan that environment. If there's any thumbs down, that means run, hide, fight, get out of there, whatever you can. If there's a thumbs down, that means something's wrong. Get the people that you love, get them out of there. Create time and distance, because there is safety in time and distance. And so if you take and you see in that Starbucks that there's somebody that's thumb sideways, you may not know why they're different for that environment, but you identify that there's something a little bit different. So I'm gonna sit on the other side of the room from that person, or I'm gonna sit outside or something, just to create a little bit of time, a little bit of distance, right? And then pay a little extra attention, just periodically see, all right, is thumb sideways the same, right? And if they're trending downward to where they go from a thumb sideways to a thumbs down, something in your spirit, your gut feeling, whatever it is, the little tingly on the back of your neck say, hey, this person's thumbs down. Then the sooner you identify that, the sooner you can get out of there and create time and distance. You look at every single incident with individuals in public that are affected by a bad actor. What do you hear afterward from eyewitnesses? And they say, I knew there was something wrong with them. I knew they had bad intentions. I knew there was something wrong with them, right? That is, built into every human. We have an early warning system. We just have to train our brains to truly understand what to do with that data. And that's why I believe in the awareness, simplifying it. If it's thumbs up, enjoy your coffee. If it's thumbs sideways, enjoy your coffee, but pay a little extra attention. If it's thumbs down, get out of there and go to Pete's Coffee or something like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think we are animals. We're animals who grew from a very instinctual place as we evolved. And I think that gut feeling, just like it is in a preyed upon animal for the predator, like that they have that early warning, like something's not right. Your hair raises, your stomach, something feels off. But we, I think, don't tune into that as much as we should, or we give people the benefit of the doubt. And I swear to God, unless they're a true sociopath, I guess, where they're like, oh my gosh, he was the nicest neighbor. He took my garbage out every day and whatever.
Right.
Certainly there are those kinds of people. But to your point, I think a lot of people who are bad actors do it from a place of emotion, not emotionlessness. And so that emotion is it's like a resounding bell going off of them. Even if they've got it really tight around them, I think it's still making noise. We have that instinct in us to recognize it, but we're so engrossed in our phone or, whatever that, and I lack that awareness. I see it all the time when I'm out in public, a true lack of awareness that people have around themselves.
Yeah.
And part of it is life's pretty good for a lot of people. So they don't think that something bad could happen, but you never know. And I was at the airport once. I think I told this story once on the show before, but I was at the airport meandering about eating a muffin or something. And a dad was pushing a stroller, no mom around, who knows, where she was, but he was pushing the stroller. There was a baby in the stroller. He was on his phone. There was a toddler toddling behind him, a lot farther behind, and he had no clue. And it was funny because the women, at first I noticed the toddler and I thought, that's not that he's not even paying attention. I've also seen this in the park. It's so frustrating. But the women got psycho. They immediately, one mom scooped up the toddler and ran up to him, and we were all like, it's like we pinpointed off of each other, like, we will protect this baby. But I love it. So shocked that this complete lack of awareness. He had no clue, and we have been bad actors. And in a second, that baby's gone forever. That toddler is gone forever. And that to that point also, the fact that the moms and the non-mom, the women, I'll just say the women triangulated with each other to make sure this baby was okay. And I think that happens also in the bigger world, that we are programmed to protect each other.
Yeah.
And that was absolutely a very long rambling rant for God knows what. But in my mind, I'm thinking, fuck, we have far more dominion over our safety than we realize. And a lot of it is also working together. Again, I bring up wolves because I find wolves so fascinating. But if you ever watch wolves out in the wild, it's like there's the one in front who's not the leader, it's not the alpha, by the way.
Yep.
And
Yep.
the rest that come along, and then there's the one in the back, and then there's the one that's on the flank who's, and to see them operate like this, and to know that the whole
As a unit.
Yeah. If humans behaved more like a unit and could recognize this person is like posting things that are a little problematic that should be dealt with. This person is acting weird. Why is this person wearing a trench coat when it's 80 degrees outside? Whatever it is.
Yeah.
But we're so scared to be like, oh, I don't want to make that person think I'm a dick for calling.
Right.
Anyway, rant.
Yeah. No, absolutely. You look at, pre-attack indicators is a fancy word to say something's not right, and distraction literally kills, but I will absolutely say that I'm alive today because I was able to identify pre-attack indicators on hostile actors, and that literally saves lives, and so the proof is in the pudding, and it actually works when you're able to get ahead of the threat curve and be able to do that. But we can call it a gut feeling. My gut feeling has just been highly trained, highly enhanced through behavioral analysis training and tons of immersion, as well as real world experience. But every single person, like you mentioned, just as a human being, you're born with a gut feeling. Just as a mom, a dad, a sibling, an auntie, whatever it is, like there are gut feelings. And the same thing that led you and the other ladies to come around that toddler is the same thing that people can do when they're in public, when they're at events, when there is somebody that is displaying behavior that is out of line with the baseline for that area. All we have to do is pay attention, not over-index on it, not overreact, just be aware and be able to create that time and distance to be able to separate from the bad that is potentially going to happen.
Can you, redacted, tell a story, redacted, that lets people in on a redacted experience that you had that is maybe an interesting anecdotally?
I have a 20-year policy on my non-disclosures. And so it's slowly starting to roll out, but I will say that one of the fun things about me being in the industry my entire life was when I first moved to Hollywood and I was working at A-list celebrity and just had the biggest wedding of the year with his celebrity and his wife. I was 165, 170 pounds at the time. His sister came up to me and was like, "Caleb, I like you, but you're too damn small." And I was like, yeah, I'm working on bodybuilding. I'm getting bigger, And so I went and I started bodybuilding for 10 years straight, like gained tons of weight so I could be the, big overt bodyguard, right? And then I moved to Silicon Valley. And I started working Silicon Valley royalty. And we're at the Silicon Valley headquarters for this colorful company. And as we're there, a guest comes from another massive company and comes up to me. He's like, "Caleb, I like you, but you're too damn big. You're scaring the living daylights out of everybody," because I was 285 pounds and all yoked out and everything. It was at that point, I was 30 years old when that happened. And it was at that point that I said, I'm not going to bodybuild for anybody else other than myself. Like, I just want to be healthy, because at the end of the day, I'm too big, I'm too small, whatever, So
in the real world today, there are assassins. There are people that are operating. I mean, this is beyond, again, stalkers. I love you, I will kill you. But true assassins, have you, in your experience, how does one in your position deal with something like that? Because then we're talking spy versus spy, elite level versus elite level.
Absolutely. Protecting individuals from, let's say, a state-sponsored program is extremely different than protecting celebrity from, paparazzi and different things like that. So, I mean, you have to use the appropriate tool for the appropriate job. When it comes to developing programs that are intended for protecting individuals from state-sponsored, targeting, we'll say, you have to take into account not only their physical executive protection, their digital executive protection, their pattern of life, what this individual does, who they interact with, how do they intake their food? How do they intake their digital data? How do they transition from one area to another? all of those things become an extremely complicated and detailed progression that we actively manage. The scary thing, I don't want to say scary, but it could be scary for some, is that bad actors only have to get it right once.
Yeah.
And if we're protecting an individual and we protect them 24 hours a day, if we're off just a little bit, if we're not using, updated tradecraft, you look at Silicon Valley, where I work most of the time, technology is evolving pretty much every 3 months. There's a major revelation in tech. And if we're not evolving our details to meet those risks that are introduced by that development in tech, then we're falling behind the curve, right? Because we have active pursuers who are actively trying to take out the people that we're entrusted to protect. How do you stay ahead of it? By getting ahead of the curve. And that's why we have the diversified. I call my teams, I like to say that my teams have constructive conflict in them, because I'm a nobody from Spokompton. I didn't used to do anything, but I have people working on my teams that are former highest levels of the government, former highest levels of the military, most elite trained operators in the world who have literally gone around the world for a career and shot bad people in the face, right? That was their job, was to be that deterrence for the United States government. And those people working alongside other people, other skill sets, that's how you take and you create a comprehensive risk management plan that is appropriate for the needs of each protectee. That is a process that takes a lot of planning. It's a lot of fun. It's definitely quite the effort. It's interesting seeing a lot of people, a lot of the teams right now, and how they've adjusted after recent events, whether it's Butler or United Healthcare shooting or Charlie Kirk situation. A lot of teams are realizing what I just said, and that is unless you're improving your ability to protect with each passing quarter, you're falling behind the bad guys.
Yeah. Or the senator that she was assassinating in her own home. She's opened the door.
Well, and the scary thing about that situation is that active killer got her information and the other government officials' information from online data services. And so that's why we recommend anybody take and engage services. The vendor I use for it is 360 Privacy, but they can go on and automatically remove your data from these online data broker sites. And literally that active killer had a list of which addresses, which phone numbers, pictures, everything that he got from those online brokers. And that information is updated. Every time you apply for a credit card, that information gets updated. Every time you apply for a car loan, home loan, every time you sign up for a free giveaway, anything like that, every time you click, send me the advertisement, boom, your email address goes into a database. That database is then sold to the brokers. The brokers then populate the sites, and it populates on, I think it's, I don't know, 300 something major data brokers that have your information. And so being able to protect yourself digitally is something we never had to look at before. What is your online net print, right? If you do a reverse image search of yourself, what is going to pop up? If you do a image search, it is very revealing. We'll put it that way.
Speaking of Charlie Kirk, as soon as all that went down, I downloaded as many of the little videos I could. That there weren't that many out there. There were only a few from various angles, but I watched it again. Grew up in a gun family, so I watched it over and over and over again. I'm like, I'm sorry, but no, that bullet did not come from above him. It didn't. I'm sorry. It did not. And I watched how his detail moved and operated, and then what happened to the crime scene, which wasn't even a crime scene, all this stuff. And I'm like, that guy was assassinated by some real people, not just some dumb kid who was pissed off and griping out or whatever. Thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, so many thoughts, right? I mean, first of all, how crazy is it that one single event has fundamentally transformed every single person's thought on what happened, right? Like every single person, regardless of political affiliation, regardless of religious affiliation,
Because it doesn't feel like they've told us a story, and
it's surreal.
Whether or not you were for that guy, against him, no one should be politically assassinated. It's horrible. That goes without saying. I don't care what side of the aisle. If you believe that somebody should be physically harmed because what they believe fucked up and need therapy.
Yeah. Well, and that the United Healthcare situation. After that, there was a poll, and it showed that 36% of adults in the U.S. feel that it's okay to shoot somebody with an opposing political ideology than yourself. 36% of people out there think that it's okay. And that, to me, was mind-blowing, right? Yeah. You look at the Charlie Kirk situation. You look at the data, right? You look at how the data doesn't align in certain areas, and that tells me a lot. Not necessarily what it's saying, but what it tells me is what is missing. And that's what, when I look at any situation, right, I look for trends over time, whether it's walking into a room, looking for that baseline. I'm looking for trends over time. And I think that the truth comes out in the most unexpected ways, but it comes out with consistency. One thing that I absolutely do believe that people, are unaware of is 95% of the data that you're consuming on social media and online is strategically produced by the intelligence communities of the world. And so be very careful to curate your insights based on the facts that survive that time and distance, a meter. Because when you look at 95% of what you see or think you see, what has been manipulated, what hasn't been manipulated, that also contributes to a lot of the questions that are coming up here. I think that there's no way for any person that was not in that tent to truly know at this point in time what happened, bar none. Doesn't matter if they're an expert, doesn't matter if they're not an expert, whatever. We know the technology that was involved directly around them. There's incredible technology being implemented, right? That's a fact that we know. That's something that's consistent across time and distance. We know that the response of the agents around them was highly trained individuals who followed patterns that are in line with industry best practices. I don't know them. I know of them. I know people who have worked them. But what I can say is their response was in line with industry best practices in many areas. Now, there's a whole plethora of others, shoulda, coulda, wouldas. Did they cover this? Did they cover that? But as far as their security posture for a crowd of that size, their security posture for a protectee with his risk posture, again, what we know publicly is that those two things are things that I think I have relative certainty that with confidence, I can say that those are two kind of pillars that I'm shaping my thoughts of what happened in that situation. What I'll be curious to see as far as next steps is this going to go like Butler, to where the entire investigation is shut down and nobody talks about it and becomes part of yesterday's news cycle? Or is there information that makes it out over time that we can use to piece together the progression? Again, when you're looking at identifying what happened, I'm looking for the progression up to the incident and then the progression after it, right? Because that's where I can create my baseline. That's where I can take and separate the fact from fiction. And that's where I can take and say, all right, we know ballistics. We know what the human anatomy is capable of and what it's not capable of, right? So I'm not saying that there's anything out of line with any narrative. I'm just saying that what I'm focused on is looking for the facts as we move forward, or the lack of facts. And I think both of those are very telling, especially with an incident like this that was so public.
Yeah, I think in 50 years, there's going to be a whole lot of holy crap moments.
I don't think it's going to take that long. I don't think it's going to take that long. You look at like Butler. The information on Butler has come out slowly, but that's the information that's come out was through private sources, from law enforcement, from people that were there, eyewitness accounts, things like that, right? So we get a better idea of what happened and, more importantly, what didn't happen, and that has given us a minute sight picture to be able to, kind of really dissect that. With this situation, you don't have any government involvement in the actual incident itself.
But maybe not our government.
Well, I'm talking about the protectors on site. I'm talking about the individuals in that direct circle. I'm talking about that. I'm not talking about any external influences. I don't call them conspiracy theories or whatever you want to call it. Individuals who have a vested interest in surviving as a human being react differently than somebody that have a vested interest carrying out the needs and the mandates of the government, you know? And so I don't think that it's going to be 50 years before we have clarity. I think that the clarity is going to come out in different iterations. I think that there will definitely be very telling developments that I think will help shape not only people's opinions, but executive protection moving forward, you know? You look at a lot of things that we've learned already from this incident. You look at snipers being used in assassinations before Butler. That was something that we said, oh yeah, remember in the 60s and 70s when they used snipers to reach out and shoot people. Like that wasn't something that we saw during the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s. Like snipers was something that happened overseas. But we didn't have that happening all the time in the U.S. And so really, I've worked large events. I've worked events, in the U.S. as large as 120,000 people. I've worked events overseas that were 1.8 million people, where we had counter sniper teams. We had all these capabilities. There's very clear requirements for deploying teams like that, right? And if you want to go with the narrative of, the official narrative of Butler, of, the Utah shooting, Charlie Kirk shooting, what could have stopped it? A lot of people are saying that counter snipers could stop it. And that's entirely possible. But at the same time, you got to make sure you understand the relevance of the situation. You're talking about a crowd that's not that big. And if you started sticking counter sniper teams on every crowd at every university, not only would it be cost prohibitive, but it's not legal for every law enforcement department to take the same shot as the Secret Service can take. Authority be able to terminate somebody's life, to be able to actually protect somebody in a situation like that. That authority is definitely limited to a select few, and rightfully so. So the solutions have to be beyond what is obvious, and that's what we've implemented for our clients.
What happens in a scenario, not necessarily the scenarios we were just talking about, but just a scenario that's general? What happens if someone in the protective detail is like a double agent, or is financially just got a windfall to behave a certain way? How do you fight against something like that? You wouldn't really be able to, because you wouldn't know until after the fact, and then you'd have to root them out that way. And I know it sounds very movie and all that, but I am curious, like, how would one deal with a scenario like that?
So it all depends on the company involved. Most reputable companies have processes in place to understand the ability of protectors to maintain their protective posture. Insider risk is not just something that is in the government. We have it in corporate America. We have it across the board. You have everything from consensual monitoring, from criminal monitoring. There's lots of technology that's in place to passively be able to assess whether or not an individual moves into an unhealthy place in their life, or if they have a major change in their life that could signal an ability to be compromised. But again, anything is possible. You can't control all scenarios. We focus on mitigating the risks that are most likely. And when you're looking at double agents in the U.S., that's not a scenario that has been prominent. Certainly not a scenario that has been well documented. The thing to remember as well is each government has tradecraft that they've implemented into their strategies. So KGB and the way they go about things is different than Mossad. Mossad is different than Iran. Iran is different than Switzerland, right? Like the U.S. government has created tradecraft over the years, and that tradecraft is used in very specific ways to meet the objectives of the U.S. government, right? And so for those of us that are students of ways to protect people, you understand what trends are associated with what portions of what government, right? Because everybody has their favorite way of doing it, right? It's like every Major League Baseball player everybody hits a little bit different. Just because they hit their way and they like their sweet spot on their bat doesn't mean, that everybody uses the same tools, tactics, and substances, we'll say. So when we're looking for, a situation like this from an investigative perspective, there are breadcrumbs that attach the Kremlin to a lot of things that the Kremlin has carried out. The Israelis are very vocal about their preferred methods of, conducting business. They're very, very vocal about, their ability to not talk about it, right? Which is entertaining for those of us who watch it, right? The U.S. government, there's been more coming out on the different teams in the intelligence community and beyond, and special operations and all those things. All of those things, through social media and through podcasts and different people talking, the tradecraft comes out, and at least the trends, you might not know exactly how they do it, but who likes poison, who likes, kinetic arms, who likes to make a splash, make a statement by what they're doing, and who likes to just be sneaky and let everybody wonder how it happened. I think that a lot is said through situations by what is not said by what members of the government. And that's what I look for when I'm looking for the facts.
Okay, now a fun question. And as I watch companies like Boston Dynamics creating these super soldiers, basically, of robotics, do you see a path forward to incorporate those types of defense mechanisms in the work that you do?
It's already been a force multiplier as far as actual robotics on body. There's you have the Saudi prince who walks around with his massive robot bodyguard. It's more fun to look at it. But when it comes to people on body, like my teams, our work is enhanced by robotics. Our ability to get ahead of the threats is enhanced by robotics and AI in general. To be able to get technology to replicate the decision-making progression that you have to have for human protectors to decide whether to step in, whether to step out, how to understand, how to integrate with, socially and all that. I think that it is absolutely something that will be front and center. I think that, self-driving vehicles is a big part of the future of transportation and things like that. So I think that there will be a lot of elements to that, as well as the vulnerabilities associated with each of those, to where we've already seen it. You just have to take control remotely of a person's vehicle, and that person is at your mercy.
I think of the humans, their human empathy and their reaction to things and how they can assess. It reminds me of the time that there was a nuclear attack. Now, it turned out to be a computer glitch. Two people in charge of hitting the counter until everyone could scramble and get real information. But that was a computer glitch that almost caused a nuclear war,
Yeah. Right. One of the most fascinating brown bag lunches when I was going to Stanford was Dr. Perry, who was a former Secretary of Defense under Bill Clinton in the early 90s. Him and his counterpart from the Kremlin did a brown bag lunch, and there were like 8 of us that sat down and for 2 hours they were just reminiscing back and forth, and talking about, oh yeah, remember that time, and what it was back then, and even back then there were tapes that they used for training for the radars, and they would put these tapes into the system, and it would simulate an attack from Russia on the U.S. And so one time when that happened, NORAD thought that it was a real situation because the supervisor forgot to take the tapes out of the machine. And literally, if Dr. Perry hadn't been able to call up his counterpart and talk to him and him say, no, there is nothing going on. What are you seeing? And then they soon after realized that it was training tapes simulating an attack that had been mistakenly left in there. then, literally we would have had the culmination of mutually assured destruction,
Every kid that grew up watching war games is like, no.
Yeah, exactly. Could you imagine being that person? Just the pucker factor alone, like looking at all these nukes. You got 8 nukes coming towards mainland U.S. It's like, wow. And then for it to all be a training tape, like.
And that's the difference of having a robot or, an AI being comparatively to a living, breathing human. That not that AI doesn't have critical skills in some regards, but it's just different. It's different.
Absolutely. And you look at the integration of technology with human performance. And I look at technology with human performance as an option that with redundant safety checks in place, we can use to be more effective at what we do. But you look at ChatGPT, you do 2 different searches in of the same thing, and you're going to come up with different results, right? So how can you rely on that consistency, whether it's a math problem or whether it's, solving the world's problems? How do you develop assurances? And, through a lot of our intelligence gathering tools and things like that, we have redundancy built into things, if then, progressions to be able to say, all right, if we identify that there's a risk here, double check it with AI again, and then counter check it with the facts that you already know to be true. And then that can help do it. But I still have my analysts go through and understand, how was this data derived so that we're getting an accurate sight picture of what risks are actually facing our clients.
Yeah. Caleb, tell people how they can find your company online and if they want to get a hold of you for whatever, lectures or to look for detail or whatever.
WhiteGloveProtectionGroup.com is our website. I'm on LinkedIn, very active on LinkedIn. Look for Caleb Gilbert, White Glove Protection Group. Yeah, happy to answer questions. Happy to help out however possible.
Yeah, Caleb, this has been great. I've enjoyed every second of it. I could talk to you for hours. And also, I want to go to literally every class, everything. So jealous that you got to go to that brown bag. That sounds
yes, absolutely. Highlight for sure. Great speaking with you, Susan.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for listening, everybody. Bye.
Take care.
Rate, review, and subscribe to Hey Human Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks. Bye.